Welcome to Ministries That Podcast, where I talk to successful ministry leaders about how they're using podcasting to amplify their mission and grow their ministry so you can too. I'm Tim Hull, your host and owner of Sonomorphic, a podcast production company that specializes in podcasting for ministries. My guest today is Pete Rogers. He's the host of Christian Outdoors Podcast with over 275 episodes. His mission is to talk about all things outdoors and how to enjoy God every day. Pete and I are going to talk about his career path from seminary to outdoor photography and writing, his 1-year commitment that's turned into a 5+ year podcasting journey, and how his podcast became a part of a streaming platform. So let's get right to it. Here's my conversation with Pete Rogers. Well, Pete, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I first came across your podcast when I was doing some research, trying to find out other ministry podcasts that would be great to have on the show, and came across your podcast, which is titled the Christian Outdoors Podcast. And you've been doing it now for 5 years, started in 2019, and you've over 275 episodes at this point. So I wanted to have you on, hear about your podcasting journey and the role that it's played in amplifying your mission and growing your ministry. So to start off, I scrolled back to the beginning of your podcast feed. As mentioned, you started back in 2019, October of 2019 to be specific. And you'd been in the outdoor industry by that time for over 2 decades. But then I also saw in your bio that you actually got your Master's of Divinity and you're ordained minister. I'd love to know, what were you thinking about as you got started? You got your Master's, you have this passion for the outdoors. How did that all play together?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. I get that a lot because it's like, okay, these don't match. Okay, these just do not line up in the traditional sense. But I went to Erskine Theological Seminary in South Carolina in order to get my Master's of Divinity because I wanted to be a pastor. I felt called to be a pastor, and that's what I wanted to do. And I was doing that while I was in seminary. I was serving 2 churches while I was in seminary at Erskine and loved it, and ended up serving. I was United Methodist at the time and served in different capacities across South Carolina because that's our little conference where the bishop would just, throw the dart at the board, and that's where you end up moving. That's the joke that the pastors say. And it feels that way a lot of the time. It really does. But even in the 90s, there was a lot of things going on in the Methodist church that just did not align with my theology. And I'm not going to get into church bashing or anything. Sure. We all know if you pay attention to anything, what's happening in the denomination now. And I'm no longer a part of that denomination. And I was struggling with that, and I just felt that God was leading me to do other things in addition to or outside of the local church pastor, which I loved the local church pastorate and still do, and do a lot of consulting for churches and mentoring young pastors and things of that nature. And I really enjoy that. But I served for 12 years in the local church, and I do guest speaking around the country now. So I'm actually leaving Friday to go to northern Pennsylvania to speak at an event up there on Saturday evening and then come back home Sunday. So 12 hours, speak for an hour and a half, drive 12 hours back. That's what we do. Whatever we do for the gospel, right? But yeah, so that was my plan. Loved my time in seminary. It was wonderful. Really challenged me to explore my faith in a new way. It was a Presbyterian seminary. Erskine is ARP, actually, one of the smaller denominations in the Presbyterian family. So yeah, and it was during that time I started writing, to see if I may.
Yeah. Go for it.
Growing up, I had a severe speech impediment, very severe. Some people called it a stammer. I called it a stutter. And I couldn't speak out loud at all. And so this struggle with God about you want me to preach and I can't talk and all that kind of stuff. So I've been writing my whole life. I would write my stuff out because I had trouble speaking. And I had gone on some hunts with some friends of mine, and I'd get home, I'd write a story about it and send it to them. And one of them just kept encouraging me, man, you need to publish this stuff. You need to publish this. I didn't know anything about the publishing world at that time. Now, for you young guys, Tim, this was pre-internet. We actually used the postal service with a stamp, a letter, and we would mail out things to editors of magazines, and then we'd wait 4 to 6 weeks to get a response. And it was the dark ages. Yeah. Some of my stories were written on slate with chalk. That's how old I am. Okay. Yeah. Way back there. Yeah, but I just started doing that, and I'm a very persistent person. So I actually went to Books A Million, which was a local store here. Yeah. They had the greatest periodical section in the history of bookstores. And I would go and write a bibliography of all the magazines I wanted to try to write for. just handwrite bibliographies on note cards, and I would mail stuff to the thing. Anyway, I finally got one published, and that was like, that's exciting. You get your name in the magazine, but then I got a check. They paid me for this. Let's go. So I said, dang, that's pretty nice. And so anyway, and I enjoy writing. I write anyway to express myself. So why not continue to do this? And, it's a slow grind. It really is. It's a slow grind. I got one published in 99. My next one wasn't until 2001. And then it was, of course, I was doing this very, very part-time.
Gotcha.
A couple of stories a year I'd send out, stuff like that. So anyway, like anything in business, connections and networking and who you know are a lot. And I got some great introductions early on, and some older gentlemen took me under their wing and mentored me in how the industry works, which is a whole nother show. And that was a big help because I didn't understand how the industry worked, but got into some more magazines, local, meaning state, and then regional. And as you start to grow that and do more and more, then the national guys will start paying you attention. Right. And anyway, so here I am 25 years later, 26, somewhere in there. And I've been fortunate enough to publish over 1,500 stories and over 4,000 photographs. But what I learned in that, Tim, is that the stuff I enjoy writing, they don't publish anymore. All right. And for any of your older listeners who remember reading Jack O'Connor and Jim Zumbo and Ted Karasote and Larry Weishuhn, who still publishes, they were adventurous stories. They were not, me and Bob went fishing and caught 3 bass and we used a worm to do it. I mean, and so I was like, that's what I like to write. The more nostalgia, the more captivating stuff, but that's not what they publish anymore. So when I speak to writers, organizations, I tell them, I said, you write what sells so you can afford to write what you enjoy. So I started putting the stories I like in books. And I've written 5 outdoor books now and 1 Christian book. And 2 of those books won Outdoor Book of the Year in the years that they were published. So that was pretty cool. But I got into it because I just love the outdoors.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I did not grow up in an outdoor family. My dad did not hunt or fish. Both my grandfathers were deceased when I was very young. I never knew them. My dad was a golfer. And I play golf too. I'm not saying, but he just didn't care anything about hunting and fishing. And I just kind of took to it naturally. I think it's just a desire God put inside of me to be in the woods.
Yeah, so I'd love to know, what are some of those early memories of getting out in the woods? Share a brief story, if you would.
That's a good story, too. Thank you. But we lived in Saluda County, South Carolina, which is an agrarian county. My dad was a Farm Bureau insurance agent.
Okay.
So we lived way out in the country, like 12 miles from town, and bored out of my mind. The closest person my age was miles away, literally. But we lived adjacent to a dairy farmer's farm. And I had been in Scouts before we moved there, and anyway, and got just interested in the outdoors. So as a young person, I got Outdoor Life magazine, and there was a thing back in the day where they called it the Outdoor Life Book Club. If you mailed in $1, you would get 10 outdoor books and join the Outdoor Life Book Club. And the only catch was you had to buy 2 books at normal retail price within a year. Well, even as a 12-year-old, I knew that was a deal. So I collected a lot of pop bottles along the side of the road and went to the store and sold them for a nickel piece and got my $1. And I wrote it and stuck my $1 in an envelope, and I got my 10 books in. And those books, Tim, transformed my life. I mean, they were basic 100 level outdoor books. I still have them on my bookshelf. I mean, they're tattered, but it was like small game hunting and how to track and find game. Called the outdoor eye was my favorite one. It's how to see animals, how they hide, and it's so hard to actually pick them up in the woods and all those kind of things. And then there was 5 hunting books and 5 fishing books. And I would literally take those books to the woods, like the tracking and finding game, where there's a picture of a squirrel track. Let me look in the creek for squirrel tracks and stuff. And I was just enthralled with it. It's something I had to do, not something I wanted to do. It was just burning in me. I'd go to school, come home, and hit the woods, and just stayed out there. And it was just something that just captivated me. And so those books and reading these stories of these people just said, I really want to do that. I really want to do that. Flying into some remote lake in Canada and fishing for fish that I've never seen a lure before and catching 100 fish a day. I thought, and I finally got to do that. I was 56 years old when I did it, but I finally got to do it. And I was like, this has been a childhood dream forever, and I've been fortunate. I've been very fortunate. I've hunted in 19 different states now and have fished in, I don't know how many states I've fished in, and Canada, because I did fly into those Canadian lakes. And I've just been very fortunate. For those of you who are listening, this is not the glory days of outdoor riding where the magazines paid you to go on these trips. No, they don't do that anymore. Haven't since the mid 90s. So all these trips I've done self-guided, public land. I got to correct myself because I don't want to tell a story. There's been 2 trips that I've been sent on, and both of them to the same place. But I'm thankful for that opportunity, right? Yeah. I'm thankful for that opportunity. But everything else I did all on my own. And I've written a book. It's an ebook. It's called Planning Your First Out-of-State Hunt and what it takes to do that. Yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, cool. Yeah, so as you're on that journey, at some point you realized, hey, I think a podcast would be a good thing. I listened to the first episode. You explained that a little bit. So I'd love to hear that story and share it with our listeners of how you heard about podcasting and how you decided, hey, this is a great tool for my ministry.
Yeah, good question. I apologize to you for listening to the first episode. It was so bad. Like anything, you get better as you do it.
Yeah.
I will never show anybody I never show anybody the first sermon I preached or the first story I wrote. No, it's bad. But thank you for that. So being in the outdoor industry for as long as I have, I know a lot of people in the outdoor industry. And one of the things I noticed is that I've never met one that was not a believer. All right. But in the outdoor world, you can't write about God and it be published in a magazine. They can't talk about God, what they do more now, on outdoor television. Outdoor Channel and Sportsman's Channel wouldn't allow them. I've had stories of people said they'd have a cross behind them on the background and Outdoor Channel make them take it down because they couldn't show it. And I was like, golly, man, I guess just all these people have a passion for the outdoors like me and a passion for Jesus, but we got no place to do it. So to your question, in 2017, I went to a Professional Outdoor Media Association, POMA, annual conference. I was getting an award there, and I went there, and they had these little seminar rooms going on, and I walked in one, and they were doing podcasting. I was like, oh, I've heard of it, don't know anything about it. And I listened to the presentation. I thought, that sounds perfect. That would be the perfect place where I can talk about my passion for the outdoors and my passion for Jesus in the same place. But I knew nothing about it other than that. And being someone who is committed, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time, right? The old saying I told my children, there's always time to do it over, but never time to do it right. So do it right the first time, and you never have to do it over. And so I spent a lot of time praying about it and researching podcasts. I listened to so many podcasts on how to podcast. His name just flew out of my head. I've listened to so many of his, Steve Jackson. Yeah. And he is really good teacher about podcasting. And they're 20 minutes, 30 minutes, not long-winded like some of the outdoor podcasts are 3 hours long. I don't know how they can do that. But anyway, and I just kept praying about it and thinking about it. And some of the advice I got from Steve Jackson and others, I took to heart. I said, I'm going to build a brand. I just don't want to just sit here and ramble. I want to do it well. And so I have a guy that I've had used with my writing brand, P. Rogers Outdoors, and he's a marketing genius. And he's the one that came up with my logo. Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
And also the name. We were kicking around a whole bunch of different names, trying to be catchy. And he said, Pete, you're overthinking this. You're a Christian. You love the outdoors. Christian Outdoors. I was like, you think? That sounds kind of just bland. He said, I think you should go with it. And I was like, well, let me pray about it. And so I did. And I said, well, what can we use for a logo? And I had sent him some ideas. I'm just terrible at that, Tim. My right brain does not function on the creative side. Okay, it just doesn't. I am terrible at that. And one of the things we'll get to in a minute is when you know areas you're weak, hire people that are strong there. Okay. But anyway, he had a bunch of different versions of this. And we decided to go with Christian Outdoors. It was just a sole proprietorship at the time. And I made a commitment. I said, well, one of the things I've learned in research is consistency is key. Yeah. Same thing in writing, same thing in podcasting and YouTubing and everything. Consistency is key. Once you get an audience, they're looking for that next episode. So with my experience in pastorate, I remember no matter how bad the week was, Sunday's coming, and you better have a sermon.
Mm-hmm.
And I always took the opinion there was never an excuse for a poorly prepared sermon, because you know what? You know it's coming,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's your chance to say, "Thus says the Lord." It's a chance to impact people that can affect their eternity. So there's never an excuse for a poorly prepared sermon. So I said, well, when I was in active local pastorate, Sunday's coming. So I said, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do one a week. And at first I started releasing them on Sundays. Found out that's one of the worst days to release episodes.
Yeah.
But you didn't know that going in, right? So I said, I'm going to do this for 1 year. And that's 50 episodes. I gave myself 2 weeks off, in my brain. I said, 50 is an easy number. I'm going to do 50 episodes and I'm going to reevaluate. And so I did that. After 1 year, I was like, it's not growing like I hoped it would, but I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to keep doing it. I just felt like I needed to keep doing it.
I'd love to jump in and talk about the logo. So if people are seeing this on video, you can see it's a fish with some barbs going on kind of look. And
fins. They're fins.
Fins, yeah. And
an eye. And it has an eye.
It's got the eye with the little hook kind of look for the eye. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is a great logo. It looks like it's a play on, the ichthys, the Jesus fish symbol. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about developing that and kind of bringing the brand around it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. I call him a jacked up Jesus fish. Okay. I know that's kind of silly, but Brian is just a genius when it comes to this. He's with Marine Marketing Group. And I told him I wanted it to be a Christian symbol, but I wanted it to be outdoorsy too. And he came up with, I don't know, maybe 15 different designs this, and we tweaked and moved and changed this. And we had teeth in it at one time. I said, that's a little aggressive, and you'll notice too that, it's the same. It's pointed and then flat down here. So it's a little bit different, but I loved it when I saw the final one with the fish on it, because it appeals to the outdoors. But then everybody sees and knows it's Christian because it's so close to the ichthys. And so I said, that's it. That's the one I want. And we have it trademarked now. Actually, it's a registered trademark. So it's protected and all. The entire logo is, because I noticed people when I started coming out, there was a couple of companies that were super close to it. So I was like, I got to get this locked up. So I did. Yeah, and it works great. Now it's on my hats and my shirts, and I have hoodies and stuff that I sell when I go to events and things like that. But yeah, that's the whole mindset behind it. Is it's Christian and outdoors because it has the fins on it, where the ichthys does not. It doesn't have the eye or the fins.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear too. So in the same way that the logo kind of combines those two, you've done the same thing with your podcast. You've taken your ministry background and your love of the outdoors and brought them together. How has that been an effective way for you to enjoy your passion as well as for those listening?
Well, again, one thing I found being in the outdoors is most people are believers. They on some level, okay, they believe in God, maybe not be active Christians, but when you spend time in nature, like outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen do, you get a connection with the Creator. You just do. And some people may call it different, but I was like, there has to be a way that we can do this. So when I interview guests, and you've listened to a few episodes, I guess. So I said, well, I need a niche that's going to make me stand out. And so we talk about their outdoor passion, what it is, where their space is in the outdoors. But then I asked them to share their faith story. And the way I define that, Tim, is I don't want your testimony, because to me, a testimony is an event. This is when I got saved. I want to know things like, did you grow up in church? And did your parents take you to church? Did you grow up? Did you, like my daughter says, I don't ever remember not believing in Jesus because I've always been there. And then you get these other people that have these very impactful moments where they do get saved and they tell their testimony, but then they start thinking about what led them there. And then I also want them to take that story and say, how does it affect you today? All right. It's not just getting saved story, which is important. Not minimized, not all. Everybody's story is unique, but it's what I call a faith journey. It starts somewhere, right? And take me through your faith journey. Tell us about your salvation event, and then tell us how that continues to impact you today. And knowing that the overwhelming majority of outdoors people are men, my audience is significantly heavy towards men, and I'd say it's 35 to 55-year-old is probably my demographic, males that participate in the outdoors. And I want to be clear too to the listeners, Tim, is I don't focus on hunting. That's just where most of my connections have been. But I've done stories on people who backpack, and which I'm fascinated with, long distance hiking, cyclists, campers. I've done it on musicians, just a lot of different people. But if you love the outdoors and love Jesus, I want to talk to you. I interviewed a taxidermist the other day who was a dental hygienist, and now she's a taxidermist. And boy, what a great show that ended up being. So, it's a broad thing. It's not just hunting and fishing. It's outdoors. If you enjoy time outdoors, then I want to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about that as you're planning episodes and figuring out which different topics to talk about. Because you've had, like you mentioned, you've had a variety of folks on. You've had everybody from coaches to music artists to, specific, like archery, specifically talking about archery. I saw an episode. And so how do you go about, okay, hey, I want to talk about this topic and who's the best person for that? What's your process like for that? I'm sure it has a lot to do with your network as you've grown that over the years. But yeah, I'd love to know, because a lot of people are booking guests for their show. What's been your process?
I actually do it different than what you said. I don't pick a topic and try to find somebody to fit it. I find a person and make the show fit that.
Sure.
So the way I do that, at first it was a grind, Bo. Oh, boy. And I forgot to tell this for anybody thinking about a show, is that I recorded 10 shows before I released one. So I had a backlog. And let me tell you, you catch up to that real quick. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
There's been a lot of like shows coming out tomorrow. I got to do something. And I've had a couple of guys, a couple of pastor friends that I rely on that bail me out. And we do spiritual shows too, where just us three pastors talk about something that's heavy on our heart. So those have been really well too. So I'll find a person that, hey, like Robert Carter, traditional archers. I was flipping through YouTube. Archery season was getting ready to start here, and I found him, and he kept referencing his faith. And I said, I'm going to get him on the show. And then I said to him, do you know anybody else in your area that can help me with it? That's a great way to get guests. Anybody who is ask people, do you know somebody that I don't know that can help me? And I've gotten a lot of guests that way when they refer me to somebody, and that's huge. And then we just reach out to them by email. But one of the things I learned, I have people that help me now. We'll get to that later, and I'll explain that. But that's what I do. So I find a person, and then I build the show around that. Okay. Yeah. And when you've been around like I have 5 years and 280 something recorded, people start emailing you. Yeah. Hey, I'd like to be on your show, or a publicist will email and say, I want to be on your show. And a lot of book authors try to get free shows. And I've done some of those, if it fits. Yeah, totally. If it fits, then I've done some of those, I have. So I don't limit it to, hey, I want to talk about muzzleloading hunting, which I've had several of those. I want to talk to Tony and get Tony's story. And Tony happens to be an expert in muzzleloading. So let's talk about that. And then we'll get his story. Nice. That's how I go about it. Yeah. So you mentioned, now that you've been doing this for several years, you have a team around you. Tell me a little bit about that. Okay. Well, like I said, when I got Brian to do this, I know where I'm weak. Okay. I got to back up a little bit. I think this is important. In 2021, so 2 years into it, I was like, God, this just is not working. I'm putting in so much work. It is just not doing what I feel like it should for how much work. And I'm paying for everything out of my pocket, right? I'm working extra jobs to pay for everything. So I came to my hunting cabin where I am now, and I said, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to pray and fast and ask God, do I need to shut it down? Do I need to do more Christian focused and less outdoors, more outdoors focused, less Christian? And that's what happens so often with this, Tim. You spend all that time in prayer and seeking God, and you get crickets. I got nothing. I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And this was in August of 2021. Okay. And that's important. So I said, the only thing I know to do is keep doing what I'm doing. Right. I didn't get a shut it down. Yeah. I didn't get a change. I didn't get anything. So what that said to me was just keep doing what you're doing. That's all I knew to do. So in August of 21, I had around 45,000 total downloads in 2 years. That's not very much for the listeners. In October, I had 47,000 in that month alone. What happened, in November, God said, I told you, just keep doing what you're doing. I got this. And in November, I had 60-something thousand. And that's when Carbon TV called. Okay. I know I'm getting ahead, but it's all part of the story. Yeah, so Carbon TV said, Pete, And it was one of my guests who was associated with Carbon TV said, you need to be on Carbon TV. And I'm going to reach out to them and tell them that you need to be on their show. And so they emailed me and we set up a meeting with the president, a video call with the president. Jules McQueen is her name. And she said, we have a podcast audio only. We have a podcast area that's video and audio, but I want you on audio only because we don't have a faith-based show on here. And I want a faith-based show on here. And we want you to be the first faith-based show. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. How does this work? So we negotiated and talked about it and signed contracts and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so in December of 21, we went on Carbon TV as an audio podcast. So it's on their phone app, on your smartphone app. If you go there, then we're there. But we're not on the TV version, all right, because that's video only. Sure. And the reason that we chose to go that route for the listeners is because all video gets into the same category on their TV. So it's really hard to find it. If you don't already have a presence on their TV network and then you add a podcast, then you just get lost. All right. So I'm only on the audio version and we get about 15,000 downloads a month through them. But what it does is it targets outdoor people. Right.
Yeah.
So anybody in the outdoors who's like, I'm a fisherman or a hunter and I want a podcast that's about this, boom, there's the audience right there. And it's really helped us. And it's been a good partnership going forward. So we were growing, right? A couple 100,000. Now we're up to 300,000. And it took 4.5 years to get 1 million downloads. Okay. We have 2.7 million this year. Okay.
That's amazing.
Actually, it's more than that now. It's a little over 3 million this year. We're getting about 300,000 a month.
Okay.
New listeners. Every month. So by the end of the year, we've already surpassed 5 million total downloads already. And it's just, and I tell you what, that's when you say, I need help. I need help because I mean, this is growing so fast. And I had a fellow on my show, John Goodwin, dear friend of mine now. He runs the Wild Game Freaks Instagram page, 70,000 plus, what's it called, followers.
Yeah.
And he's a pastor in upstate New York, near Niagara Falls, outside of Buffalo.
Yeah.
And we just hit it off. And I said, dude, if you can do this with your Instagram, can you do something with mine? And I will pay you. And he said, well, yeah. I mean, he's just such a good guy. So he said, I'll see what I can do. I had 678 followers at that time. All right. That was 2 years ago. Now we got almost 10,000. So John works magic. Know where your strengths are and hire people that are in your weaknesses. And then I'm having so much trouble finding guests, because I still have a full-time job outside of this. And so there's a lady friend of mine. I say that incorrectly. She's a female and she's been cutting my hair for 25 years. Right. And she had to have her knees replaced so she couldn't work. Right. And a hairdresser doesn't have, sick leave or anything. If they're not behind the chair, they're not making money. And I said, Charlene, do you have any secretarial skills at all? Because I need help and you need some money and I can help you with this. Can you help me? Well, come to find out, she was a legal secretary before she became a hairstylist. And so she said, well, I'll try. I don't know anything about outdoors, but I'll try. And man, she has killed it. She digs through social media and through YouTube and she finds people. She's who got Ted Nugent on the show. She's who got Gerald Swindell. She got Mark Farner from Grand Funk Railroad on the show. She finds people and she'll send it to me. What about this person? What about this person? I said, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah. And she said, okay, well, and so she's the one that does all my scheduling for me now.
Yeah.
She finds everybody for me, and I don't do any of that anymore. And I do all my own audio editing, but I have somebody else that does my YouTube editing because, again, I'm not good at that. I know how to do the audio editing, terrible at video editing. I don't know how to create graphics to put them in there and do all that kind of stuff. So I hired somebody to do it. They have since moved on to something else. So now John's doing that too. He's doing the Instagram and the video editing. And then I also hired a podcast promoter that understands the algorithms that Pete doesn't understand and knows how to grow it organically, so it's like legit stuff. And she's done a great job as well. I mean, she's helped tremendously. And none of this coincided with that. It all came later. It all came as like, okay, I'm growing. And like in indie industry, Tim, you got to keep the pedal to the metal when you got momentum because there's a lot of people wanting to be where I am. So I got to make sure that they don't get there. that I stay where I am, that I just keep pushing hard and keep pushing forward, because it can go away just as fast as it came.
Sure.
But God has really blessed us, man. I give all the credit to him. I just sit here and talk to people and try to stay out of God's way and just watch him work. And it's just amazing. It really is.
Yeah. So now, as you have the rearview mirror perspective of, all of these things happen, are there any specific things that you can look back on and be like, oh, that probably helped lead to this thing that actually led to this growth, that now that you're able to kind of use that going forward of, hey, this is a good growth strategy. I kind of did it on accident, but now I know that it works. Is there any examples of that?
I think the number one thing, and I tell people this often, is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned that earlier, is make a commitment to do it for a period of time. It is a slow grind. It is a slow grind. Okay. That old saying, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success, is very true in podcasting. You got to commit to it. And you know this as a podcaster yourself, that like 80% of podcasters stop before their 20th episode.
Oh, yeah.
Well, nobody's listening. I'm not making any money, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Like, well, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Ask yourself the why. Why are you doing it? For me, it was a passion where I got a place to talk about Jesus and talk about the outdoors in the same place. Get to hear a lot of different stories from people that have really helped me, and their stories are helping people. And I just say, if it's helping people, then I want to keep doing it, even if it costs me money, right? And time. And so I think the number one thing is ask yourself, why am I doing this? Are you doing it to make a living? Then you need another job for a long time. Okay. Or are you doing it to impact people? Or are you doing it because you have a passion for the topic that you're doing it for? So for me, it was a passion to talk about it. I felt led to do this, and consistent. I have never missed a week. No matter what's going on, I have never missed a week. There was one time when we had an issue going on in the family. I did one re-air of a great episode, but it was a year and a half later.
Sure. Yeah.
And I said, we're doing a re-air because some of you are just now finding us and you need to hear this episode. And so I brought it back, and it was episode 5. I brought back a year and a half later and did that one. And that's the only time I've done that. And I say consistency, know why you're doing it. And you got to be passionate about it and understand it's a long haul. Okay.
Indeed. When I tell people that I'm working with that are looking to start a podcast, you need to be in it similar to what you had decided. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but the year, deciding to do it for a year is really where you start, and then you can reevaluate. But really, 3 months in, 3 weeks in, you're just getting started. I mean, that's just how it is in podcasting. You don't see this quick success that people are often looking for, and you got to be in it for the right reasons, like you're saying, or else it's just not going to be fun. It's going to feel like a grind. The audience is going to feel like it's a grind and not want to hang out anymore.
That's right. And like I said, anything worth doing is worth doing well. So do your research ahead of time. Don't just go buy a microphone and start talking. And I'm not trying to, how do you say this? Some of these podcast hosts that ramble for 30 minutes before they get to their topic, I approached it like I always approached a sermon. Make your point, make it very well, and stop. Don't keep circling the airport trying to figure out how to land this thing. Make your point, make it really well, and stop. I preach sermons that were 12 minutes. I preach sermons that were an hour, because some texts take a lot more explaining to do for the congregation to understand. Some texts are pretty simple, right? And if that's the text God laid on your heart, then make your point, make it well, and stop. You don't. Yeah. Like some of my shows are 35 minutes, some are an hour and 15 minutes. I try not to go much longer than that. I've learned through experience how to cut it off. Or if it's too good, I break it into 2 episodes. I've done that just a few times, but it's like too good. And I'll say, let's just keep going. We're really good into it. I'll just divide it up into 2 episodes. And I've done that a few times as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'd love to know, at the beginning of the episode, you mentioned that as a kid, you had a stutter. And here you are today talking all of the time as a speaker on your podcast. So as people heard that context at the beginning and hear you talking now, I'd love to know, what's that journey been like, and how have you gotten I don't know what the right way is to ask this, Pete, but basically, how has that progression changed to be now it's a main part of what you're doing?
Yeah, I know. Isn't it funny how God does
Yeah.
stuff? He took somebody that couldn't speak at all, and man, now I make my living talking. Well, I went to a lot of speech therapists as a young
Okay.
person. And like I said, I could not speak at all.
Mm.
Here's a story I tell when I go to events and stuff. I say, it was so bad. I played football in high school. I was much smaller then. I didn't have all this 145-pound quarterback. And I couldn't call the plays in the huddle because I stuttered so bad. We'd get delayed games. I'm trying to get the call, getting the play out. And finally, the coach figured out a way. He'd send in a receiver every play, and the receiver would call the play in the huddle. This was back when we huddled up every time.
Yeah.
We didn't do shotgun everything, so he would call the play in the huddle. But I went to a lot of therapists, and one of them, who happened to be my aunt, Aunt Betty, identified, Pete, what I'm noticing is there are certain consonant combinations that you struggle on more than anything else. And L's and T's that are together, like the word Little. Most of the time I can't say that because my mouth just gets stuck. Or if you're doing a sentence where multiple words start with the same letter,
Okay.
I'll go slow because I can do it if I go slow. As an example, where will we be going for dinner tonight? I have to go that slow. I have to pause after every word. So she taught me to do what I call micro pauses between words. And she also said, if you will slow down and enunciate every word, I'm going to do it slower so you can hear it now. Enunciate every word, you don't get stuck as often. So when I write out what I'm going to say, it is horrible grammar, but it's what I can say.
Yeah.
Okay. And in seminary, they taught us to use manuscripts, not outlines. And that was wonderful for me because I could write it the way I need to say it.
Yeah.
And I would use punctuation, a semicolon for a longer pause, a comma for a shorter pause. And I'd put spaces between my words, pause, take a breath, reshape your mouth, and go again. And then I memorize it.
Gotcha.
I memorize what I'm going to say, but I still have my notes there for my, I said this because every preacher knows you're going to chase a rabbit every now and then. Something's going to come to your mind and you're going to, there you go. And they got to come back. Where was I? And there, I still have my notes for that.
Yeah.
And if you haven't chased a rabbit preaching, you're not preaching, you're reading. All right. And so I've learned through years of experience how to write what I can say. And that was a huge transformation into writing what reads well too. That was a difficult transition because I had been writing sermons for so long, and then I would read them out loud. I can't say that. I got to change that sentence right there so that I can say it. And I would read it out loud as if I was preaching it off the computer screen. I'd like, okay, I got to change this and change that. And it got to where you just develop a technique for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 60 years old. I've been doing this a long time. So I know I look 80, but I'm 60 years old. I've been doing this a long time. So you just learn that. And I know what words I cannot say, like the one I spelled for you, and others that have LT combinations or multiple W's, or those are the most common ones that I run into. So I just avoid those words and I substitute.
Sure.
So I say small or tiny. I don't say the other word.
Yeah.
And I'll say, instead of, I'll stop so I can say it, literature. See, I drug that L out. You may not have heard it, but I felt it in my face, right? Instead of that, I'll say books or periodicals or something like magazines. I won't say the other word because it causes me to stumble. And while you may not hear it, I get this flush feeling that I just stuttered, and now they're going to think, oh, here he goes. One of the things. So it's just a lot of effort, and I'll give a lot of credit to God. Okay. It's been a lifetime of developing and honing and sharpening, and anybody knows sharpening takes time. Sharpening takes time. So I think it's just miraculous how God took someone who couldn't speak at all and turned into a preacher and a podcaster and a speaker that goes all over the country speaking at events and doing leadership conferences and wild game dinners and men's retreats and stuff. And I tell that story every time because I want people to see that it's not being boastful. It's like, this is what God can do.
Yeah.
If you trust him and say, God, you got to speak through me because you know I can't speak without you speaking through me. And then I just get out of his way.
So I want to talk through a couple things that are a little bit more technical, kind of the back end stuff a little bit. You're talking about having a team. And so there's got to be a way to support that team. How have you had some support through either donations or sponsors? How have you figured out a good way to be as financially sustainable as possible with the podcast?
Well, it wasn't till this is 2024, 2022 when I started getting sponsors. All right. And that was just people that believed in me
Yeah.
and believed who I do. It was CVA, which is a firearms company,
Yeah.
was my first sponsor. They gave me $6,000. All right. That doesn't go far. All right. But I said, well, hey, God's opening doors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I use that, and I will always be devoted to them for believing in me when nobody else did. And while I seek donations, I get very few, less than $200 a year.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know how to do that either. All right. How to get people to donate. So, but I do understand the outdoor industry enough to know that they have large marketing budgets and very small nonprofit budgets. So CVA told me, we have a much bigger marketing budget and we have a nonprofit budget. Our nonprofit's designated every year to go to the same place. You need to be a for-profit company or you're not going to get any money. So I formed an LLC, Christian Outdoors LLC, because they wouldn't give money to sole proprietorship. So I did that like really quick.
Yeah.
I formed an LLC so they could pay me. And I just put together a media package. You may be familiar with it because of your experience with the other organization, but I put together a media package and said, this much money gets you this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so like Taurus is my title sponsor now, example, and that's another firearms company. All right. They make excellent handguns. And I say, if you're the title sponsor, it costs this much money, but this is what you get. You're going to get the opening ad in every episode for the year. You're going to get 2 social media posts a month. I'm not going to remember all of it here off the top of my head. That's why I write it down in the media package. But you're going to get A, B, C, D, and E. And then the next level down gets A, B, C, D. And the next one, A, B, C. And then A, B. And then A. And then whatever comes before A. So I have packages go all the way down in every level. And I just go to the trade shows. That's what I did. I went to SHOT Show, which is the largest shooting hunting show in the world in Las Vegas. I despise Las Vegas, but that's where the show is. And it's hyper expensive to go to that show. Hyper expensive because they know they got you captive there in Las Vegas, right? But I said, I got to go because if you're not there, you're not relevant. And I just went and used some contacts I had in my writing and went and shook hands and showed them my stuff and said, I want you to be a part of this. And I went to people, Tim, that I knew were believers. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies out there that are believers, but you don't know it. And some of them I don't have as sponsors, but I just really support what they do. I mean, there's one company, Hodgdon, Hodgdon, hard word for me to say. They make gunpowder. Okay. And they give 10% of their profits back to their employees and 10% of their profits to faith-based organizations. That's huge.
Yeah.
They don't advertise it. They don't talk about it. They just do it.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of companies that do that. So I've said, I want to find them and I want to give them a place where they can support that. And I've been very blessed, that in 24, this year will be the first year it's paid for itself.
Okay. Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's be
5 years
clear
in.
to your audience. Quick. 5 years in. October is my year. So I just started season 6. Took 5 years for it to pay for itself. And that's without paying Pete. Pete has not taken a dime. Because see, I'm paying John, I'm paying Charlene, I'm paying Jessica, and I'm paying all the expenses, right, that it takes to run the show because we are an LLC. So I have to do things according to the way my accountant says to do it, right? Where Pete was paying for me to go to SHOT Show, now Christian Outdoors pays for Pete to go to SHOT Show, right?
Sure.
And Pete was paying for me to do this. Now Christian Outdoors paying for that because that's how you're supposed to do it tax-wise. So that's what I do. So a good accountant is also huge. Best money you can ever spend, listener, is to get a good CPA. I'm serious.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's not that expensive. It's less than $500 a year. Okay. But it's worth every penny because not only do they do your taxes for you, but they make sure you're doing everything according to the law, and that you're spending the money out of the right bucket. Okay.
Yeah.
It took 5 years. This is the first year that it's going to pay for itself. And it's just barely going to do it, but it is going to do it.
That's great.
To God. making it all line up. And right now, sponsors for next year, Taurus went ahead and renewed for 25 back in July. They said, we want to go ahead and renew because we love what you're doing. But I think it's important to under-promise and over-deliver. All right. So if I tell you you're going to get 50 episodes and 2 social media posts, you're probably going to get 3. Okay. Social media posts. You are going to get more than what is promised in the contract. Under-promise, over-deliver. All right. So anybody who's taking money from somebody, this is how I look at it. People are giving me money to talk into a microphone, right? And they're buying an ad, okay?
Right.
It's no different than a radio ad. You use your sales pitch however you want to, but my sales pitch is this, and I share it with everybody, is if you buy an ad on your local radio station, it's going to cost you for a 30-second shot anywhere between $500 and $1,500. That seems to be the average in my area, right? Only the people that are listening Tuesday at 2:00 are going to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay. You spend that money with me, I permanently embed that into the show, and it will always be there. So your $1,500, as an example, is going to be on 4 different episodes forever. Okay. As long as my show is out there and it's archived, it'll be there even after I stop, which I don't know when that's going to be. It's there. So I get listeners every month that say, Pete, I just found your show. It's awesome. I'm going back and catching up. Yeah. So they go back, God bless them for going back to episodes 1 through 10, I tell you that, but they go back and listen, that ad is still there. Okay. You buy an ad in a magazine, a full page ad in a national magazine is going to cost you $15,000. Let's say they got 120,000 subscribers, right, to their magazine. Well, the statistics show, Tim, that 70% of those will never be opened.
Wow.
Right. And of the 30% that's left, 15% people will go to the story that they're interested in. They'll read that and then throw it away. So now you're down to 15%. I can't do the math in my head what 15% of 120,000 is, but that's what, 18,000 of those people. They're going to just flip through it or it's at a barbershop or at a doctor's office or one of those places. So you're really down to about 4% of the people are going to see your ad. Okay. So you paid $15,000 for a full page ad that only 4% of the people are going to see. You come to my show and listen to it. If you give me that much money, you're going to get in 50 episodes and you're going to get your ad out to 5 million listeners. And it's growing by 300,000 plus a month. So you're going to get that. So it's a much better spend for your money to advertise on podcasts. But the problem is those companies don't know that yet. We have to educate them on what podcast is. As they tell me, we know what we get with TV. We know what we get with print. We don't know what we get in radio. We don't know what we get podcasts. So I tell them, this is what you're getting. Yeah. You got to show them what you get and then over deliver.
Yeah. That's
over
good.
Deliver.
That's good. Well, Pete, as we're talking about this coming year, I would love to know, what are you most excited about as you look forward to 2025?
I got nothing. I'm just kidding. Pause for effect. Got nothing. It's really good, Tim, just to see what God's doing, to continue to see how God is blessing people, and I really want to say this. I know I'm talking long here, but
you're great.
My little tagline is, how do we enjoy God every day? And that's my Christian book is, Do You Enjoy God? And it explains how to do that. It comes from the Westminster Shorter Catechism, which is the first question is, what's the chief end of mankind? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. When I read that, Tim, it changed my life because I thought, am I enjoying God? I mean, I acknowledge God, pray to God, I worship God, I love God, I tolerate God sometimes. Let's be real, right? But do I enjoy him? And when does forever begin? Does that mean after I die? No, forever has already started for me. So how do I enjoy God every day? So it set me on a journey to seek to enjoy God every single day in a deeply personal, passionate manner. No matter what I'm going through, can I enjoy God today? Today, just focus on today. What can I do? I can enjoy his sunrise. I can enjoy his sunset. I can enjoy the beauty of nature, watching a big old white-tailed buck walk across the field. I can enjoy that, but am I enjoying him? Not just what he does and what he's created. I want to enjoy him on a deeply personal level every single day. And that is my driving force behind it all. And so as I go into 25, we do have a nonprofit version, which is called Christian Outdoor Adventures. Yeah. That just started last year. And we got our board of directors in place. And we're going to have an event next spring that we're calling the Great outdoors camp out, where we're just going to have a camp out for men.
Nice.
And we're doing this on Kentucky Lake in Tennessee on a friend of mine's property. And we're going to invite men to come and to bring their tents, their campers, their RVs, wherever they have, and set up. And we're going to have a camp out. And we're going to do man stuff. And we're going to have some activities. But the main thing we're going to do is we're going to create an opportunity for men to come together and to share our passion for the outdoors and our passion for Jesus at the same time. And I'm really excited about that. We hadn't even announced that yet. So that'll be coming out, announcing that in January. And we're going to be talking about getting people signed up for it and everything. So that's the nonprofit side. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, is being able to engage with men face-to-face, personal, and doing something that we all love.
Nice.
So that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
Love it. Well, let's hit the high pass segment real quick, where we ignore the lows and I ask you about some of your favorite things. So, Pete, with Christmas being only just a little over a week away, what's your favorite Christmas tradition?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was out on the phone with one of my daughters this morning and I asked her that so that I would know what hers is and see if we're on the same page. So I have 5 children and they're all grown now and 2 grandchildren. But she said one of her favorite traditions is, of course, we read the Christmas story, right? But I also read The Night Before Christmas. It's a little children's book, and we all gather around, and I read The Night Before Christmas, and I do it in a very animated way, because I started when they were toddlers. Right? And we do that every year. I read The Night Before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And I do that very animated. Of course, some of the older kids are like, oh, God. But most of them love it still, and that's something that we do every Christmas Eve, and I really look forward to that. Yeah.
Nice. All right. As a hunter and an outdoorsman, what's your favorite type of game to hunt in your home state of South Carolina?
If it's legal and in season, I'm after it. Okay. If a hops, run, jumps, or flies, I'm there. I love it all. I've never understood single species hunters. Okay. But in South Carolina, we don't have a lot of variety. You know, we got white-tailed deer. Sure. And a few bears and a lot of wild pigs. And I love hunting wild pigs. I do, because we can hunt them year round and there's no limit and they're smart and cagey and it's a lot of fun. But deer and pigs, I would say. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, what's one of your favorite stories from a listener about how the podcast has impacted their life?
I've gotten emails from people that say, I discovered your show and it changed my life. I became a better husband. I'm back in church. You know, there's one that stands out. He's from Arkansas. I'm not going to say his name, but he said, I was driving back home from Tennessee where I was duck hunting, and I found your show and I listened to it, and I was like, it changed my life. I normally would be duck hunting on Sunday morning because our season's only 60 days long. But I told my wife when I got home, we're going back to church on Sunday. And she's like, what? I don't have anything to wear. Well, just put on something. We're going to church in the morning. And they went to church, and now he's active in the men's group. His wife is singing in the choir. They're active in their church again. He said, it's made me a better father and a better husband by discovering your show. And that's all God. That is not Pete. That's all God. And I give him the credit for it. You know, I don't want this to be a show that this is Pete's show. I want this to be God's show.
All right. So that's a fantastic story, Pete. As we close, you mentioned this earlier, and this is a question that I frequently ask at the end of my show. Who else do you think would be a great guest for this podcast?
I think of several, but one that comes to mind is her name is Mackenzie Smith. She has a show, My Valley, His Victory. She's a backpacker, lives in Utah with her husband, and I've had her and her pastor on the show. She has a great show. It's called My Valley, Her Victory. She goes by Kenzie. It's Mackenzie Smith, but Kenzie Smith is a wonderful young lady doing a great job with her podcast. I would really highly recommend her.
Well, thanks, Pete. I really appreciate you sharing that recommendation as well as sharing your story on the podcast. I'm sure our listeners will really enjoy it.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity. I do.
That was a fun conversation with Pete, getting to hear his journey from pastor to podcaster and how God's used him in spite of his speech impediment. You can listen to Christian Outdoors Podcast with the link in the show notes. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Ministries That Podcast, produced by Sonomorphic. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow or subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. That's the best way to get the word out so together we can help more ministries grow and thrive through podcasting. Now come back in 2 weeks for the last episode of the year, where I'm going to highlight some of the best podcast advice shared on ministries that podcast this year. You don't want to miss this episode. Well, until next time, Merry Christmas and keep encouraging your audience as they follow Jesus.